stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Any additions, deletions, or corrections to this agenda as presented? Everything okay with it? All right, that gets us down to public comments, and that's for non-agendized item. I do have one public comment card. Kay Wolverton-Ito, is Kay here? Oh, there she is. Hi, Kay. Sorry. They'll make sure that they turn your microphone on. Sean, is that microphone on? Okay, it's on, Kay. Proceed whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. My name is Kay Wolverton-Ito, and I'm a former, I wasn't even planning to talk tonight. I used to work at the library, and I got my degree, my master's in library science, and I just love our library so much. I appreciate what you all do as the library board, and I'm just excited to hear from John Thomas that you are going to be discussing expanding, reinstating at least some of the hours, open hours for the library. So I just am expressing my support in reinstating as many as you can, but certainly understanding that due to the pandemic and staffing issues, all the hours, the 65 hours may not be reinstated. But whatever you can do, I hope that it includes Sunday hours and evening hours, because there are certain demographics who just can't make it during the normal hours. So that's my piece, and I'm sure Mandy will have a great report. Thank you.
Appreciate your comments. Would anybody else like to make a comment at this time? That's the only card that I have. What else? Okay. So that's going to get us down to the consent calendar, which is A, B, and C.
I'll move the approval.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please vote. That passes 4-1 with one absence. We don't have any discussion items at this particular time. We will later on in the regular council agenda. So with that, any oral communications, any reports or anything today? Anybody, trustees, have anything they'd like to add tonight? Okay, so with that, we are going to adjourn.
I don't have a gavel, so. Pink. And with that, I will open the Camarillo Sanitary District. Let the record reflect that all board members are present. And I don't think we have any public comments. Okay, so we'll move on to the consent calendar.
I'll move the approval.
I'll second.
Okay, have a motion and a second. Please vote. That passes unanimously. Okay, do we have any oral communications? Seeing none, I will recess us for our joint discussion with the Camarillo City Council.
Get my gavel back. I don't want my gavel.
Do you want this one?
All right, no, that's okay. I can knock on the wood. There you go. All right. We need more gavels here.
I don't have one to give to you. Sorry.
Would you like a gavel too? All right, I'm going to call to order the meeting of the successor agency. And let the record reflect that we have 4 members present with Mrs. Craven absent. We have approved no amendments to this agenda, I assume. Public comments, would anyone like to speak before the successor agency? Seeing no one run up, we're going to move to the consent calendar.
I'll move the approval of consent.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Please vote. That passes 4-0 with one absence. We have no discussion items. Any oral communications? Seeing none, we will adjourn the successor agency. We will call to order the meeting of the Camarillo City Council. Let the record reflect that all 4 council members are present with Mrs. Craven absent. Do we have any amendments to this agenda? Seeing none, we will move forward to consent calendar.
I'll move the approval of consent.
I have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that passes 4-0 with one absence. I want to mention really quick, because I think we have her in the audience here, on item G on the consent calendar, we just approved the appointment of Rachel Richmond as our new Assistant City Attorney, and I know she is here. I want to give her an opportunity to say hello and
Yes,
speak.
thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Again, we got to meet briefly a couple weeks ago, so I look forward to continuing. I'm doing more work with Brian and the staff, and I look forward to working with all of you, and so I appreciate the opportunity. And if you have any questions, I can answer them.
Welcome.
I think we're good. Thank you very much. Welcome aboard.
Great, thank you. Okay, have a great meeting.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we're going to move down to our 5 o'clock discussion items. We're going to start with item V, retired annuitant appointment.
Thank you, Mayor. On March 23rd, earlier this year, the City Council adopted a resolution declaring an exception to the 180-day waiting period for hiring a retired annuitant in accordance with government code. Lindy Moore was appointed as a retired annuitant to the vacant position of Public Works Administrator, while the recruitment to permanently replace the vacant position was conducted. This assignment ends July 5th with the appointment of the new administrator. Since there is a need to transition the workload to the administrator and assist with backlog work, staff is recommending the rehire of Lindy Moore in an extra help position. This appointment will be for a limited duration and will end no later than July 29th. This item to you is brought under government code, and so the recommendation is to adopt a resolution declaring an exception to the 180-day wait period for hiring a retired annuitant in accordance with government code sections 7522.56 and 21224, and appointing Lindy Moore as a retired annuitant for extra help for a limited duration.
Do I have any discussion or comments, Mr. Kildee?
I have a comment.
Sure.
Yeah, I've known Ms. Moore for most, if not all, of my years on the council, and she is a tremendous individual, very bright, very knowledgeable, and I'm thrilled that she would be willing to come back and work for this organization. I found her extremely competent, and my opinion is we've been in very good hands with her. So those are my comments.
Mr. Tremblay?
With thanks to echo what Mr. Kildee said, and with thanks to Ms. Moore, I'll make the motion, staff recommended motion.
I'll second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Please vote. That passes 4-0 with one absence. And takes us down to item W, ordinance adjusting compensation for members of the City Council.
Good evening. Council compensation is reviewed every 2 years. Per Government Code Section 36516, subsection A4, allows for increases in council member salary provided the increase is adopted by ordinance and the amount does not exceed an amount equal to 5% for each calendar year from the date of the last adjustment. Any approved increase requires the City Council approval, and action must be completed prior to the general municipal election. Historically, this item is reviewed each June of even-numbered years and sets the next 2 years' calendar compensation amounts. The City Council's compensation was last updated in 2018, which set the rates for 2019 and 2020. The City Council elected to waive increases in calendar years 2020 and 2021 due to the public health emergency and the unknown impacts of the city's budget as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The current salary for each member is $1,482.57 per month, which has been the set rate since 2020. At the meeting on June 8th, Council unanimously approved a compensation increase of 2.5% for 2023 and a 2.5% for 2024. Tonight, the required ordinance is being presented for a first reading. If approved, it will be on the July 13th agenda for a second reading and final adoption. The recommendation tonight is to request the reading of the title of the ordinance from the city attorney and waive further reading of the full text. I'm available if you have any questions.
Do we have any questions?
Any questions?
No? And I don't have any public comment cards on this item. All right, any discussion or comment?
I made mine last meeting, yeah.
I think we all did. Okay.
Request
With-
a reading of the title.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tremblay. Brian, may we have a request? We're going to request a reading of the title.
Yes, this is ordinance 1194. It's an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Camarillo amending Section 2.08.040 of the Camarillo Municipal Code relating to the compensation of city council members.
Move to waive further reading and introduce that ordinance as referenced by Mr. Burek.
I'll second it.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Please vote. That passes 4-0 with one absence. And gets us down to item X, Second Amendment to the employment agreement with our city manager, district manager.
Yes, this will be an item that I will present. This does involve a proposed Second Amendment to the employment agreement with the city manager, Greg Ramirez. And the history with regards to the original employment agreement is that that agreement was entered into on July 1 of 2020. There was an amendment on July 1 of 2021, and this is the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment would is proposed to increase the salary of the city manager by 5%. That would be an increase from $268,562 to $281,990. I would mention that this proposed increase is based upon a performance evaluation, and it is also consistent with the comparable salaries for the other city managers in the county. The employment benefits that are described in the agreement on an annualized basis would have a value of $174,559. The Second Amendment under the change, if you will, under the Second Amendment is that it would amend Section 8 of the employment agreement for severance pay in the event of termination without cause, and that would be an increase from the current 6 months to 12 months. And I should mention that that is within the range of similar severance provisions of other city managers within the county. So I'm available to answer any questions. The proposed action is to consider the resolution that would approve, excuse me, it's not a resolution, it's a motion to approve to authorize the mayor to sign the Second Amendment to the employment agreement. And I'm available to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Questions?
No? All right,
Move the recommended item.
I have a motion,
I'll second.
and I have a second. In case-
I have a
please-
comment if you'd
Oh.
like me to make a comment.
Yeah, if you'd like to make a
I
comment.
just want to
sure.
make a comment that Mr. Ramirez comes highly regarded here. From my personal council member perspective, I've been not disappointed, and he works extremely hard, as does all the rest of our employees here, and we get our money's worth with him and his service to this community.
I'm ready to vote.
I will echo that. All right, with that, I have a motion. I have a motion, and I guess we got some dittos. We have a motion and a second, so please vote. And that passes 4-0 with one absence. And gets us down to item Y, the 10-year professional services agreement with LS&S.
Thank you, Mayor. Library Systems and Services, or LS&S, has managed library operations for the city of Camarillo since 2011, and services are currently conducted under a one-year amendment extending services last year during COVID, and it gave staff and the ad hoc committee composed of Mayor Boucher and Councilmember Tremblay an opportunity to evaluate the agreement and evaluate provisions in the operations and determine if there were any changes. So any consideration for opportunities to improve either operations or look at cost effectiveness of the agreement. The library operations strategic plan is also an item that LS&S had been working on, but unfortunately, its final preparation was not in time for the discussion of this proposed agreement. However, input received by patrons and members of the community are consistent with what city and library staff are already aware of and currently working on, such as expanded technology and offerings of current relevant program to expanded technology. it also, input from the survey also indicates a continuing interest in expanding youth and children's programs, and in some cases, modernizing options or current programming options. Since programming is a matter of the library director's current responsibilities, she can continue to incorporate changes to the work plan to reflect the community needs within the resources available. So that strategic plan, while it'll provide for performance measures and it'll provide some recommendations, the programming matters can be taken under, now under consideration by the library director, as long as it doesn't require resources that are not currently in the budget. In evaluating the operations for efficiency, staff also evaluated library activity for cost effectiveness by evaluating technology needs and expertise and activity of the library during full service levels. As a result of this analysis, staff is proposing that IT support services for the facility, including patron and staff support, are incorporated in the agreement. LS&S are subject matter experts in the world of the library IT services, and as indicated in the report, provide this service at other libraries. City staff will remain closely involved with the acquisition of technology and software equipment, and contracting out services will provide a cost savings to the library fund of about approximately $85,000, and support is expected to be enhanced. Outside of the evaluation of support services, city staff had already indicated a need to improve technology equipment, software, and electronic services, and staff will continue to annually evaluate resource needs and present them in the overall budget. Staff and LS&S also evaluated other operational duties and noted some opportunities for efficiencies that will create a time and/or cost savings in the overall agreement. And in addition, LS&S proposes to maintain their annual increase at 2% for this proposed 10-year agreement. And finally, staff and the ad hoc committee evaluated the activity during full service hours or pre-pandemic activity. Activity is measured by entry and exit door counters at the front door of the library. So the measurement is expected to be slightly higher than the actual patron visits when considering re-entry exits, staff entry exits, and patrons dropping off materials. There are figures in the agenda report that provided counts that are listed as pre-pandemic and also examples of post-pandemic activity as part of this analysis. Since the pandemic, the library has been operating at reduced service levels from full service levels are 65 hours per week, and so we've been operating at 40 hours per week. That has impacted some programming, so not all program has been reinstated during those 40 hours. The library has reopened since April of last year. However, the number remains lower than pre-pandemic. So as we've seen in other services that are provided by the city, such as transit, we're seeing that pre-pandemic numbers in services are not to what they were, or current levels are not to what they were pre-pandemic levels. Part of this impact of reduced hours, which includes reduced programming, it could be because of reduced programming, so there's less programming, and some of this is estimated to be changed behavior post-COVID. As been demonstrated, as I mentioned, by other services, numbers are increasing at a lower rate than expected. The ad hoc committee evaluated the information presented on library activity, and the committee supports the reinstatement of hours to 61 hours per week, or 4 less hours per week than full service hours of 65. This represents closing Monday through Thursday at 8 p.m. instead of 9. The pre-COVID data reflects low activity during the last hour of the day. This is represented in figure 1 of, I'm sorry, not figure 1, figure 3 in your report, where on the 8 to 9 frame, you see that we have less activity in that. And again, this represents entries and exits. There is a perceived service level reduction for patrons who tend to use the library during that last hour. And the reason I use the word perceived is because we're currently closed during that. So there would be no direct impact if the hours were to be maintained closed. So if the 8 to 9 hour is to remain closed, there's no direct impact, meaning we're not reducing that level of service that's already been reduced. But there is a perceived impact for those who may have been using the library during that time, but as I mentioned earlier, that 8 to 9 hour, the activity, the in and out activity is pretty low. The ad hoc committee did discuss a Sunday closure, but were not prepared to give the council a recommendation and felt that that was a discussion for the full city council. Because the Sundays remain closed, we don't know what that activity level is post-pandemic. We do know that pre-pandemic, however, Sundays was an active day, about half of what a Monday through Thursday activity pre-pandemic is. So Sundays activity was about 650 recorded activity points, where a Monday through Thursday pre-COVID was about 1,400. So it's about half of the activity. And again, on Sundays, the perceived impact would be for those who tend to use the library on weekends. It's perceived that they would have, come in on Sundays, but we've been currently closed. We also know that the circulation is low, so materials checkouts at the library are low on Sundays, but that's because the demographic appears to be, families or, folks that are using the library for the computer or internet purposes, and or for studying. So the demographic was, in that age group that maybe uses the library for studying purposes. So there is no recommendation on that, but that's open for discussion for the city council. The library director and staff are committed to marketing services and reinstating and creating new programming with the goal of achieving pre-COVID activity levels. So that is a discussion that we've had with the library director, Allison, as staff. So there is a commitment there to, depending on council's direction tonight, whether it's any of the hours will be impacted or it's full service hours, they will continue to market the programming at the library. LSNS has performed well for the Camarillo community. They have been understanding and willing to work with the city during times of need. The pandemic was definitely an example of when they swiftly worked with the city to provide services to our community under the health and safety guidelines. And for the reasons listed in the report, the city would recommend that the city council approve a 10-year agreement with LSNS, and that the city council give direction to staff regarding the hours of operation and authorize the city manager to make those changes in the agreement. What's presented to you tonight in the agenda report as an attachment is the 10-year professional service agreement at full service hours.
All right, thank you very much. Do colleagues have questions? For sure. Mr. Kildee, we can start with you.
Yeah, Ms. Nichols, my thoughts on this is that this is a living and a working document. Was there a discussion that if we do see some increase in volume at the library, that the hours of operation can be adjusted during certain times of this potential agreement?
We did have discussions with LSNS on that. What they would require, and we saw this during the pandemic, is a advance notice. Right now, there is, if the city council's action is, or direction is to maintain hours closed, we're currently closed, there's no direct impact to staff. However, fully reopening and then closing down the road causes an impact to staff in loss of hours or positions, and also programming. So there would need to be a reasonable notice for both parties in order to effectuate a change in hours.
So, we're all, we're still, COVID is still with us, and things are opening up, obviously, but, quite frankly, we don't know 100% about what it's going to look like 6 months, maybe in a year from now. And I guess my question is, I'm hoping that there's some verbiage in the contract that if we do see a big upswing, and if we have like a suggestion box there, and we see more people that are coming later to the library, or perhaps earlier, we'll be able to track that data and be nimble enough to perhaps, make a change in the hours of operation if we see fit.
Sure, we can continue monitoring the entry and exits, and we can continue talking to patrons and visitors regarding our hours. And any fluctuation from that is, if there's a recommendation to be brought to City Council, staff certainly can do that. Again, we would want to give, depending on what, which way it's going, we would want to give LSNS ample time to be able to coordinate that with staffing and programming. However, yes, the staff will continue to monitor the use of the library.
And then my last question, that, we've all heard that there's staffing shortages out there. Are we, convinced that LSI can staff our library to whatever level we ultimately decide?
Absolutely. LSNS is ready to staff at full service hours.
That's all I have.
Additional questions? Mrs. Santander?
On page 10 of the report, there's some charts at the bottom that show the cost for each configuration. What I don't know is, what is that second column of numbers?
Okay. I guess I should have labeled those columns. I apologize for that. So that's the annual contract cost. So the first column, of course, we have the dates, and then we have a description of the services. The third column is the annual cost of the operation, and then the final column then is the monthly billing cost.
Okay.
I apologize. That should have had labels.
Thank you. That's the only question I had.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yeah, Carmen, I just want to follow up on Mr. Kildee's question, because part of his question was not only with respect to monitoring, but it's with respect to contractual flexibility. So let's say we are in a position hypothetically in the future where we wanted to increase the number of hours that the library would be open. Pursuant to the proposed contract, we could do that, correct? We have that discretion to do that?
Yes, and in discussing with the LSNS, they would need some advanced time, reasonable time to be able to make that
Okay.
change.
And conversely, we could do the opposite.
That's
We could
right.
say we can bring the number of contract hours down. I'm not advocating one way or the other, but we have the contractual flexibility to do either based upon sufficient notice, right?
That's right.
Okay, thanks.
Carmen, I have one or two questions. We would be outsourcing under the framework of this current, or this proposed contract, we'd be outsourcing IT support services at the library. They will, LSNS, one, has the technical know-how and expertise to perform those functions, and they are willing, and they will assume both liability and responsibility for network security and the like.
That's correct. So that is part of the agreement, so that's spelled out in the agreement. They're subject matter experts in software and technology that is specific to libraries. They provide this type of service for other libraries, including a couple of libraries here in the county. And they would be taking on responsibility for, just protecting the city's network and information. And, we also have cybersecurity requirements. So, yes, and staff works hand in hand with them. We've been in contact with them through this process, and then just as today, as late as today, but we will be in discussions with them about that. So we will know what they're doing and to ensure that they're maintaining the protocols that are required by the city.
In addition to that, they'll also be assuming responsibility. They already book study rooms. We're talking the small study rooms inside the library. But as of up until now, the city and our city staff has been booking the large conference rooms. So they will be assuming responsibility of the booking of the conference rooms as well. Is that right?
Well, we didn't change the community room reservations or the conference room. We didn't come to an agreement on that. We have some work that we need to do with our policy internally in terms of the services that we provide and the cost. And so there's more work on staff's level, city staff level to conduct before we can bring the city council a recommendation. So as of now, we've left that. We saw that as a potential efficiency. We think that Alice can provide a good job, but we also need to look at our policy first and perhaps revise that before we go out and contract that. So that includes conference rooms as well, as we'll maintain that as our responsibility. Ellison is responsible for reserving study rooms. And there is one conference room, but I can't tell you which one. But definitely, I can't remember which one, but definitely study rooms, and they do have some responsibility.
So if that were to get nailed down, that would probably likely come to us as an amendment to the contract of LNS.
That's correct.
Were to assume any additional or an expanded scope of responsibility.
Right. Mm-hmm.
All right. Additional questions?
I have one other
Before,
question.
yep.
So when and if staff does evaluate that, when do you think the evaluation period will be concluded? I mean, how long will it take staff, do you think? I don't want to put you on the spot, but are we talking perhaps, later this year? Are we talking into the future? I know there's a lot going on.
Yeah, it'd probably be within the next, 3 to 4 months. We have to evaluate the policy, get some feedback from the proper committee on the intent of the reservation of the community room. The conference rooms aren't the issue. What's at issue is the community room. And just to determine and provide you, the city council, just some feedback on what we've been doing the last 11 years with that community room, who's been using it, how often it's been used. It really is being used primarily by the library programming, also by city meetings, and then some other meetings with nonprofits. There isn't a big demand for private events. And 11 years ago, or maybe, even later than that, the city council at the time felt that there would be a demand for that for private. So I think we have to look at that again, provide you some information on that, bring you up to date on what's happening, and perhaps there's changes that need to be made. That's just going to take a little while for us to study. And then whatever is remaining, depending on council's direction at the time, if it makes sense to outsource it, that would be our recommendation. But we've got to do a little homework on our part. So I'd say within the next 4 months. Councilmember Kilby?
Thank you.
One additional question. I want to follow up with something Ms. Santangelo had asked about on page both 10 and 11, the chart. We have 4 charts, because I know this is going to be something of a discussion for us here soon. Regards the hours per week that we're faced with, making a decision on number of hours per week the library is open. This first column is the annual operating costs of the contract under each scenario, and the second column is the monthly, that respective monthly cost for each of those 4 different scenarios, right?
Right.
So the difference between, let's just start from the bottom and just take the two extremes, 54 hours of operation per week versus 65 hours of operation per week. The difference is approximately $8,000 a week, or less than, or approximately $100,000 a year, so just a hair under 5% difference of the total cost of the contract, right? Okay. All right. That was my last question. I assume we have a few people in the audience who might want to speak on this topic. In the event we do, I do want to be cautious and see if anyone has any public comment, wants to address the council. We did receive some public comment via email, and the council has been distributed to council. We have seen that and read that, so I want to acknowledge that. So aside from that, then I guess we will go to discussion amongst yourselves. Yeah, sure, Mr. Trimley.
Okay, I'll crawl out of my limb first. First of all, a series of thanks go out and to our staff, to Mr. Thomas, Ms. Bassett, Ms. Starr, Ms. Nichols. I want to thank you for the amount of effort that you have put into this. your knowledge of library operations is extensive. And I will tell you, having been a member of the ad hoc committee, they have really dug into the topic. They have a thorough understanding of our library operations and the city's relationship there too, and the financial issues. If I've left anybody out, by the way, thank you to them as well. I don't mean to leave anybody out, but I really want to compliment our staff for the thorough nature of the work that they've done on this. And the staff report speaks for itself in terms of its thoroughness. Compliments to LS&S for your work and your cooperation throughout this process. We had extensive discussions in the ad hoc committee, and so thank you. I'm going to thank the mayor on a number of fronts tonight, but a thank you to the mayor for the thorough discussion that we had in the ad hoc committee. I'm satisfied that we have examined this from just about every angle we can examine it from, operationally and financially and otherwise. And I also want to thank the people who sent us emails. Thank Ms. Ito for her verbal comments earlier in the evening. I am fine. The only issue that I really want to, I'm fine with all the recommendations. The only issue that I want to chat about a little bit and get the input from my colleagues is on the operating hours. That's the only one that I'd like to hear a little bit more on. But let me tell you where I'm going. As far as I'm concerned, closing the last hour of the weekday, I think the numbers speak for themselves. I think closing that last hour between 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Is justified, and particularly when I look at the average daily activity and our pre-pandemic numbers. Reopening on Mondays, to me, to use an overused commercial expression, is a no-brainer. I think we should reopen on Mondays, and I think, in fact, if I can, I think the committee was aligned on that one. Certainly, I think it should be, we should reopen it on Mondays. The one that I still continue to struggle with a little bit is whether or not to reopen on Sundays. And I think I can be persuaded either way, but what I found, what was difficult is, okay, so what angle do I look at this from? And particularly figure 2 on figure 2 on page 7 of 12 is interesting. If you look at it with one set of lenses, the number of folks who are going to the library on Sundays is just slightly less than the folks who are going there on Fridays, during the week. And that is a consideration. The numbers remain lower overall at the library than pre-pandemic, which makes one wonder, well, should we leave it closed on Sunday and see whether or not there's a demand there, or should we follow the, if you'll forgive the expression, the Field of Dreams philosophy, if you open it, they will come. I think given that the figure 2 numbers pre-pandemic are relatively similar between Sunday and Friday, and notwithstanding that there is a pretty healthy cost savings if you keep it closed on Sunday, when you have both the operating cost, well, both the personnel cost as well as the facilities cost, the savings are around $92,000. So I could take that. One could assert that the easier and most financially prudent thing to do is just to keep it closed on Sundays. On the other hand, I think all of us agree that a robust library is critical to our community's quality of life and to the success of our residents and the success of our community. And I guess I would consider Sundays. One thing and so I'd like to hear, and this is why we kicked it over to the full council, saying we need to hear from everybody else, from our colleagues on this. If we do reopen Sundays, I would really want us to keep those, I would want us to do a close monitoring of those numbers. I suspect that what would happen is that our numbers will ultimately, if we reopen on Sundays, ultimately equate somewhat to what pre-pandemic level Fridays. In other words, well, I'm not quite sure where they will be ultimately, but I think the Friday numbers and the Sunday numbers will probably be relatively the same, not materially different. So the one thing I'm struggling with is the Sundays. I'm inclined to say let's reopen it on Sundays, but I want to hear all of your input on that. And that's the one thing that we had a pretty robust discussion in the ad hoc committee about, and we wanted to kick it over. We wanted to punt it over to you to our colleagues to hear what you had to say. So that's where I'm fine with all the rest of it. I'm fine with the 10-year agreement. I'm fine with my only concern on this is whether or not we do a reopen on Sundays. And again, thank you to the folks who have sent us emails and expressed their opinion.
All right, we're going to punt to our colleagues. Which you two? Ms. Santangelo, you want?
Thank you. So I want to say thank you to the ad hoc committee and to all the staff that were involved. These numbers are so essential. I'm a data person, so I want to see the numbers. So it was really, really helpful. So I appreciate the work that was done to gather this and compile it for us to understand. I feel the same way about that last hour for the Monday through Thursday. And I, too, have been going back and forth with the Sunday. I am leaning towards opening Sundays. If we remain closed on Sundays, I don't know how we're ever going to know if there's a demand for it, because we can't track anything. We don't, people aren't coming to the door and knocking and turning away, or they might be, but I don't, we're not tracking that. So I don't know how we would ever determine, based on use, when we would reopen Sundays, if that was a discussion. I also agree with Mr. Tremblay in, we don't have numbers for Sunday now, but logic tells me that it would follow the same type of pattern as what we see on Friday. And pre-pandemic, as you said, Sunday and Fridays are pretty close. So if I base my decision on that, then I wouldn't see why we'd close Sunday and leave Friday open if they're about the same volume. And just additionally, everybody we've heard from has asked for Sundays. And I know it's, a handful of people that we've heard from, but that speaks to me because I think I'm hoping that it's representative of what more people in the community think. I think the library is such an integral part of our community, and so many people access it for various reasons. And I would really like to see us open on Sunday. And I would agree that we should continue to monitor it and see what happens and look at all the numbers, sort of on a continual basis to see if our hours of operation are meeting the demands of the community. So that's where I am.
Mr. Kildee?
Well, it's a little self-serving because Sunday is when I used to take my two girls to the library. And the reason is because Sunday's a day off for me. I feel really strongly that we ought to open it up on Sunday. I think it's really important to give this a try. I know that the numbers and the volumes are somewhat, challenging for, very reasonable, comments on this. However, I used to go in the afternoon, and if our family, it's been a number of years ago, were of any barometer here, we used to go to church on Sunday morning, and then I would take them after we got back in the afternoon. Now, there's a lot of families and a lot of people also go out to breakfast Sunday morning. So it would seem to me if we want to have a little bit of a deeper discussion, I'm okay with opening from 10 to 5 on Sunday, but perhaps maybe 11 to 5 might be something that we might want to consider too. But, for lack of conversation here, I do think that we ought to really give Sunday strong consideration, and I'm hopefully that we can do it. Now, as Mr. Tremblay and Ms. Santangelo, and I'm sure Mr. Mulchay will say too, that we need to make sure that we monitor this and see what the volumes are on this, because the worst thing we can have is an open library and not enough folks to, use it. So I'm convinced that once the word gets out that I think our numbers are going to be fairly strong on Sunday. I'd certainly like to see if we want to do a 6-month trial. I'm certainly in favor of that, but I understand the struggle for Sunday, but I personally would like to see us give it a try because it certainly worked for our family, and I know there were several other families in, our genre too that would use it Sunday too. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. And I have the privilege of going last. I will just simply say, I echo a lot of the sentiments that each of you already spoke of. I am strongly in favor of keeping the library open on Sundays, and that I see the library as a public utility, and we should err on the side of trying to provide that public utility and that service it provides to our residents for as long as possible. I was kind of doing the brass tacks on some of the numbers here on pages 10 and 11 in terms of hours and costs. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, the differential between the 65 hours versus, like, say, the 54 hours, the difference between those two is we're limiting the hours available to the public by 17%, but yet the cost savings is a hair under 5. You know, it's not
very
equitable in that sense. There's a lot of fixed costs in the library. It's a big building to simply let sit empty and unused or not available to the public. And like a lot of working folks, particularly young families now, Kevin, you're right. Sunday is, and oftentimes Sunday is the only day of rest we have,
Yeah.
and the only opportunity we have to go take kids, family, whatnot to the library. So I think we err on the side of making sure that we provide this utility to our residents. So I'm in favor of keeping the library open on Sunday. In regards to the last hour of those weekdays, yeah, Mr. Tremblay and I were, I think, pretty unanimous in just looking at the numbers, that it only made sense to close that last hour. It was heavily underutilized. Most people left an hour or two before the library closed. But the people who might rely on the library on those Sundays, and for that very broad range of hours, I think we should give consideration to them and make sure we have it available. So that's where I stand. I do want to. I appreciate staff and all the time and effort and diligence that staff has put in developing this. I know there's a lot that went into it. There's a lot of discussion, negotiation. Mr. Kildee?
Just really quick, I appreciate the staff time and the ad hoc committee's time on this important issue, because I know you folks spent a lot of time working on this, so. But it's the crown jewel of Camarillo, right? I mean, hey, you know, if anything deserves time, this certainly does. Yeah.
Mr. Tremblay, are you?
No, thanks, Susan and Kevin, for your thoughts as well, and Sean. I'm persuaded to support reopening on Sundays. Again, at the risk of being redundant, the library is so important to the quality of our life and the quality of our community that it's one of the best places we can spend our money, frankly. It's vital. Sean, you indicated utility. Yeah, it's vital. It's like infrastructure for us, if I can use that term loosely. So just to clarify, though, then, if we were to take off the 4 one-hour segments on the weekdays, then we would be doing this library operations at 61 hours of operation per week. Is that
That's
correct?
correct.
Mr. President? All right. Then I would move the entire staff recommendation in the report with under item 2B at 61 hours per week, and then move items 1 and 3 under the staff recommendation as well.
I'll second that motion.
All right, I have a motion and a second. We're all clear on that? Yep, okay, please vote. And that passes 4-0 with 1 absence. That gets us down to oral communications. And I will, Mr. Tremblay, do you want to start?
You want me to go first?
Do you have,
I've got kind of a long one because I want to do some discussion.
Okay.
Give you an update on the drug, so.
you want to hold it to the end?
You tell me.
I'll have you go last.
Okay.
Mr. Kildee, we'll start with you.
Okay, let me find my meetings attended here. Bear with me for just a moment. I don't know, let's see. Okay, let me see if I can remember. I attended 2 VRSD meetings. I attended a citizen appointment meeting today, and I attended a finance meeting was it finance or investment yesterday? Do you remember? Was it finance or investment? I think it was, anyhow, so I attended that, and I think those are it yeah, there's 4, okay. And I just want to compliment, the streets are getting paved in Camarillo, and I've had some calls. It's taken a while to get there, but they look good. I don't know if any of the other council members or any of the staff or anybody else has been able to drive around yet. It's still a work in progress, but they're looking good. So, again, one of the biggest compliments that I've ever got in my years on the council is our streets. So I know all of us are. We're kind of real prideful of our streets in this city. So we want to make sure that keeps up to the high level that it has been. So, and with that, that's all I have.
All right, Ms. Santangelo.
Okay, for meetings attended on June 9th, the Airport Authority, June 15th, CPA Executive Committee. June 9th, I attended a ribbon cutting for Stages Recovery. That was exciting. It was a joint ribbon cutting with Ventura Chamber and the West.
Ventura County Business.
That one. And really doing neat stuff with offering treatment for people struggling with substance abuse. June 22nd, which was earlier today, I had a CPA Finance Committee meeting. That's all for meetings. I just wanted to, this is one of the funnest times of year for me on social media because you get to see all the people graduating, and it's really cool to see everybody celebrating and finishing a year, and so congratulations to everybody who's promoted or graduated, and congratulations to your families. And that's all I have.
All right. I'll go next, and I'll let Mr. Tremblay go last. I'll be quick. June 9th, I had the Library Ad Hoc Committee meeting with Mr. Tremblay. June 9th, I also had the Airport Authority meeting with Ms. Santangelo. June 10th, I was not able to attend. I had a conflict, but I do want to acknowledge it. CSU Channel Islands had the groundbreaking ceremony for their what's called the 32-acre project. And that is out at, as we know, there's that, I think they've changed it now, like Mission Hills or something, but it's, I still call it University Glen Apartments, or University Glen housing, and it was built in 3 different phases. 2 of the 3 phases have since been built out, with that last large parcel now being graded and utilities are being put in underground, and that's going to comprise of 310 market rate apartments, 109 for sale homes, and 170 income restricted apartments for seniors. So some much needed housing out there at the university. It's something that we worked on, or came before us for the CSU Channel Islands Site Authority, which I sit on, represent. So it's actually good to see this project move forward finally. It's been a long time coming, and it's good to see that it's finally breaking ground and moving forward. 2, 3 things. First, I do want to acknowledge and congratulate our graduating seniors, and on to the next phase of your life. But it is really cool. It's really happy. I'm really happy to see all the smiling faces, and I know for particularly the last 2 years, it's been tough for a lot of them, but the fact that they're able to have that graduation in person this year, I think is very rewarding to a lot of them and their families. I do want to acknowledge I had a complaint, and I would like to refer this to Streets and Transportation Subcommittee that Mr. Tremblay and I sit on. Fieldcrest, between the roads of Wood Creek, I know there's been probably complaints in the past. I don't know to what extent staff has studied it, but between Wood Creek and Butterfield, I'm always hearing about people speeding along there. And I would like to refer that and have Streets and Transportation Committee at least take a look at it. So if I have a second. Okay, thank you. So we'll refer that, and I'll talk to explain more to staff, but just looking at the speeding between Wood Creek and Butterfield on Fieldcrest. And then I have received some complaints from residents. I just want to keep my colleagues informed in regards to some airport noise between the hours of midnight and 4. Airplanes taking off, and helicopter noise. So for any of those, and most of it's over people who are in my district, and largely Village of the Park. I'm getting most of the complaints from Village of the Park, and one from Woodside Greens. You will hear helicopters from time to time, and those are largely search and rescue operated by Sheriff's Department. Those are allowed and not under any type of restrictions because they fly in and out of the Camarillo Airport. And so they will have to conduct life-saving missions and search and rescue operations from time to time. And there's nothing we can nor should really do about that. Those people, they need to do their job. But in the event you hear airplane noise in those restricted hours after midnight, between midnight and 5, I think, or 10 and 6, actually. There were some flights in the last 2 weeks. I spoke to the county's director of Department of Airports, and he did confirm that over the last week there were 3 flights that took off within those restricted hours after midnight. So he wanted to acknowledge it, notify us of it, and those pilots have been served a notice that they were within violation of the restrictions at the Camarillo Airport, and he's also reaching out to all the pilots, making sure that everyone is fully aware, and reminding everyone of those restrictions moving forward. And as he puts it, we will continue to work to be a better neighbor to Camarillo. So I want to let you guys know of that situation, and just that we've had really positive communication with the director of airports, and he's working to continue to rectify that issue and make sure that the airport and its operations are within compliance with the 1976 agreement with the city, between the city and the county. And that is all I have. So, Mr. Tremblay, I will turn it over to you, sir.
I apologize that I had to excuse myself for a couple minutes, so I will look forward to catching. I guess I can watch it on YouTube, Susan, what you and Kevin said, and I apologize that I had to excuse myself for a couple minutes. All right, meetings attended. June 9th, the CASA Board of Directors meeting, the Library Ad Hoc Committee meeting with the mayor. On June 10th, I had 2 Metrolink board committee meetings, the Executive Committee and the Contract Operations and Maintenance Committees. Tomorrow, Metrolink will be adopting a budget, next year's budget. On June 18th, and thank you to the mayor, I got a chance to pinch hit for the mayor at an Eagle Court of Honor for Troop 225 for Jacob Mara, and it's always really fun for me to do that. So I appreciate the mayor letting me pinch hit for him on that one. And today I had both the Citizen Appointment Committee with Mr. Kildee, and then earlier today I had the Cayugas Drought Response Task Force. And just before I get to that, Sean, I'm glad you mentioned that. I had also received some complaints independently with respect to operations outside the operating hours or per the 76 agreement at the airport. So I'm really glad that you briefed us on that, and I'm glad that the Director of Airports is taking affirmative steps to rectify that. So before I go to the slide up on the wall, because I wanted to brief you at what happened because I think either I volunteered or was volunteered for. I'm not quite sure which one. The drought task force. Starting off on this, I again, Sean, I think this is my night to thank you. I wanted to thank the mayor for sending our May 29 letter to Metropolitan Water District. And the letter contained basically the meat of what we talked about in our prior council meeting. So I want to say thank you, Sean, for sending that. Subsequent to that letter being sent, we received a letter back from the chair, Gloria Gray of Metropolitan Water District. And I think the bottom line from that letter is that she acknowledged that an inadequate conveyance structure is present, that they can't get the water to us that we should be getting, and that's the way I read the letter. But they also offered to meet with us, et cetera, and I know that that planning and that preparation is in place. I did advocate to the Cayugas Municipal Water District Board of Directors on June 1, and then I made an appearance. You can only do it by Zoom. They won't let folks like me in the meeting room, but I advocated to the Metropolitan Water District Board of Directors on June 14. And as you would suspect, I made several of the same comments to the Metropolitan Water District Board, but within my 3-minute limit that I made during the last meeting in terms of discussing our concerns. That was in the mayor's letter. We have been working closely with Callegas. Callegas has been very responsive to us. They're very supportive of and have taken heed of what we have had to say about the inadequate conveyance infrastructure to our geographic area. It's really, I want to praise Callegas. It's been a team effort. Praise Camarillo as well, because we have to act together as the two major water providers, public water purveyors in Camarillo. And so we've all been working together, and I anticipate that we will be having a meeting with Metropolitan Water District staff next week to discuss some ideas on moving the ball forward. The general manager for Met did indicate during the Met meeting on the 14th in response to my comments that he was looking at near-term, mid-term, and long-term options. And you know, I'm realistic enough to know that things don't happen overnight. But at the same time, I think our letter was well said. I mean, I certainly feel like our area has been treated as a second-class citizen by Met. And in fact, 30% of Metropolitan's constituency is treated on a different or a disparate basis than the other 70% for purposes of conveying water. Today at the Drought Task Force, before I go to the conservation timeline, I spoke, forgive me, at some length at that task force meeting, and I asked for support on two fronts. One, a joint letter that all mayors, electeds in our area, would sign to Metropolitan, in essence attaching our mayor's May 29th letter with a short letter of support indicating that they feel the same way, and we would send that letter to Metropolitan, and I think that will be and there was unanimous support for that. And Mr. Klotzel and Mr. Ramirez can come rescue me if I go astray or say anything wrong. So I think we will have that support as well in terms of alignment in our county among those folks who receive water, state water, water from the State Water Project. And then secondly, I asked for individual advocacy by electeds in terms of getting our message across to Metropolitan that they needed to address this conveyance infrastructure issue and do it soon. Okay, now with that said, that was sort of the first item on the calendar today for the Drought Task Force. The second item was with respect to how are we doing? And that's what this slide deck is all about. You have a copy of the slides, a physical copy, hard copies of the slides in front of you, and thank you to staff for putting this together in time. We got this today. So in essence, I just want to go through this very quickly, and again, I mean it. Mr. Klotzel, Mr. Ramirez can step in and correct me if I go astray, but you see this first period of Phase 1, June, July, and August, being so important on an assessment of how we are doing from a how our area is doing from a water conservation standpoint. And as we reflected, as the mayor reflected in his letter, it's the right thing to do. We all must do it. We're all doing the best we can right now. And during June, July, and August, that is when it's critically important to conserve for everyone to pitch in is what I want to say, and save as much and conserve as much water as we possibly can. In August, what was reported today and what we anticipate will happen is that there will then be a board report to the Metropolitan Board to make a decision on whether we would go to 0 days outdoor irrigation. And again, remember, we're talking about lawns principally here. We're not talking about trees and shrubs. We're talking principally about lawns, even though I think it's rather a misnomer to say 0 outdoor watering. But I would expect that the Metropolitan Board in August will have to make a decision on whether or not beginning September 1, we would go from the one-day schematic to the 0 days per week watering lease. That's what was articulated to us today. And then from September and October, we would, there would be that continuing phase 2, and then in November, a board report on whether or not, if things get really bad, and that's all I don't know how to say it any other way than that, but if things get really dicey, then there would be a consideration by the Met Board on whether or not public water purveyors would go to what's called a volumetric allocation. So some thoughts on that from the meeting. And I should say, by the way, too, that it's important. I want to go back to the infrastructure conveyance issue just for a second. It's important that you know that two things. One is that Callegas and we and others are advocating a specific board action by the Met Board in August, which would include a physical solution and a funding commitment. I'm not prepared at this point tonight to say what that exact option would be, because those things are still being reviewed. And the information that I'm getting is that there is an intention by Met staff to go to their board in August relative to our conveyance infrastructure issues and try to put something on their agenda for August. So we'll see what happens. So sorry, I digress back to infrastructure there for a second. Now let's go back to the timeline. So you see the timeline is really tight. Could we go to the next slide, please? Okay, this is hard to look, it's really hard to look at, and particularly for folks like me who have glasses, it's hard to look at, but if you follow along in your hard copies, you'll notice that we've got two separate tracking graphs. On the left-hand side this is what all of the state water project dependent agencies, including Callegas, Las Virgenes, et cetera, and basically 30% of the Met population have been doing as of June 14. And you'll notice that against their targets, they are altogether, all of the SWP dependent agencies are 6% under the targets. That's good news. That's good news. On the right-hand side, however, is Callegas. And the entirety of Callegas, and we're part of Callegas, if you look at the upper right-hand corner, the performance is we're still, the Callegas group as a whole is still 16% over where Metropolitan wants to see from a target use standpoint. So as it says at the very bottom, the conservation process is off to a good start, but Southeast Ventura County needs to step it up because we're 16% over target, and we is a generic term. It's not just Camarillo, but it's everyone else within Callegas. Could I get the next slide, please?
Question, Tony.
Oh.
Could you maybe, I mean, I think most of us know, could you also verbalize that Callegas for the most part is the Mission Oaks part of Camarillo for the most part?
Callegas, the entire
that's
city of
Camarillo.
Camarillo is within Callegas Municipal Water District,
Right.
and we have two water purveyors, as we all know. The city of Camarillo, which supplies water out to about Callegas, to the west of Callegas Creek, and then to the east of Callegas Creek is the Camarosa Water District. And so, does that?
Yeah, that's it.
I guess, okay. And then this is what's called their drought supply and update and drought report. And I just want to call to your attention the very last bullet, which I can't even read up on the screen. Sorry about that. It's not staff's fault. It's just, we work with what we work with, but it's on Callegas actions. But I do want to quote that last bullet. On April 27, Callegas declared a water shortage emergency, and that was pursuant to a Met requirement, and adopted an emergency water conservation program. The emergency water conservation program mandates a 1 day per week watering restriction or equivalent. The emergency water conservation plan includes an alternative path for compliance, which is a volumetric allocation of imported water supplies based on gallons per capita per day. You recall we discussed that a little bit last time. And for a community that relies exclusively on state water project supplies, the volumetric limit is approximately 80 gallons, 80 GPCD, 80 gallons per capita per day. which is prior to adjusting for seasonality. Now, our area, when we have about a 60-40 split relative to state water versus groundwater, and when our desalter is fully operational, which we would anticipate, I'm going to put Mr. Klotzel on the spot, maybe in August, September, we're hoping, knock on wood, our city of Camarillo's reliance on state water will go down to about 13% eventually. May not happen right away, but eventually. So we're doing really well compared to some other Callegus member agencies and agencies within Las Virgenes, for example, that have that are almost 100% reliant upon state water. So we're in a little better position. But the reason that becomes important is if you then go to the slide, or if you go to the sheet on the right-hand side, which is the progress on reducing imported water use, that's the emergency water conservation period between June 1st and December 31, to the end of this year. And if you look at that period and where the city of Camarillo is, right now, we're at 0% over under. In other words, we haven't really saved any water appreciably, and you can look at how everyone tracks on that. But then if you could go to the next slide, please, and that's an updated slide that has numbers through the period ending June 21, and you can see that we're on, we're going in the right direction. We're 1% under, but we need to do more. We need to do more in terms of our water conservation. And this contrasts the performance of the city with the other water purveyors within Callegus, including Camarosa and other cities. And you can see where we are ranked. So at the bottom, it says increased conservation and enforcement of 1 day per week watering is needed right now. And that's the take-home message. We need to continue to conserve, and we need to enhance our conservation efforts, and everybody within Callegus needs to do that as well. Some of the discussion today during the drought task force call, there was obviously a contrast made that all SWP-dependent agencies, so right now it's a great trend, they're 6% under target. And by the way, if we go under target, what that means is, here's the take-home message. If we end up going under target, the take-home message, at least as far as Callegus is concerned, is their view is that would mean 1 day a week for the rest of this year, out to December 31. If we are over target, then it may end up going to 0 irrigation days per year. But Callegus is at 14 right now, is at 14 to 16% over target. So then comes the next logical question, which is, well, okay, if the entire, can we go back to the slide that's got both graphs, Carrie? Thank you. So contrast the left-hand slide with the entire SWP-dependent agencies with the right-hand side, which is Callegus only. And the question was, well, okay, if the entire state water-dependent area is under target, will we have to go to 0 days per week, even if Callegus is over target? And the answer to that is, well, while Metropolitan is reserving its rights, if Callegus is over, could it treat Callegus differently than other Metropolitan Water District member agencies? And the answer from Callegus, at least at this point, is their expectation would be that Metropolitan will view all of the state water project-dependent agencies as a whole, in toto, and would not treat member agencies differently if they end up going under target. And Mr. Ramirez and Mr. Klotzel, hopefully I've articulated that correctly. But all bets are off. If we don't do our targeting and conservation job, then we may be in for a very, very difficult fall. And that's really a long presentation on what's going on the drought task force. We're going to meet again next month. We'll be meeting on every, fourth Tuesday, I believe it is, in the morning. Oh, and there was a little bit of discussion today about potentially development of other supplies in southeast Ventura County, but rather than get into, there are some projects in terms of storage credits. If Charlotte were here, she could talk, so for example, Cayugas does have storage credits with the GMA. And so one potential option would be to have Cayugas go to the GMA and say, could we go ahead and extract extra water? The difficulty with that right now is that United Water Conservation District is reporting a very large amount of storage with sea level elevations above that of groundwater elevation. So it's really parched, I guess I could say, out on the Oxnard Plain. We have a real difficult groundwater extraction and seawater intrusion problem. So trying to access stored groundwater at this point through GMA may not be feasible. Bottom line, though, is to go back to that. Can we go back to the timeline? I would say D-Day for the community and for the Cayugas community is in August. And that's when things are really going to be reviewed in terms of what the conservation efforts have been. And it's possible that we may go to 0 days per watering per Met mandate. That's not our city council. It's not Cayugas. It is Metropolitan Water District and in turn by the state of California. Then, if we ended up at the end of the year going to a volumetric allocation, that would be highly problematic, and I don't want to go so far down in the weeds on volumetric allocation schematic tonight, but just, it's really problematic to do a volumetric allocation. It's really difficult, and it may not be something that is even feasible for Camarillo or for other member agencies for a variety of reasons. And Mr. Ramirez and Mr. Klotzel, you can weigh in on that, but it would be a very difficult proposition for a number of reasons. That's the gallons per capita per day schematic, and that would be really difficult. Okay. Mr. Ramirez, Mr. Klotzel, I spoke at length. I apologize, but is there anything you want me to add? Or anything you can add?
No, sir, that was very, very, very good. The only other thing I would add is there was some discussion about bringing back an item about the formulaic aspect of these limits and some concerns of folks on the task force of what the formula is as far as the reduction. So that's going to be discussed at our next meeting.
No question.
And it's really difficult because then you come into the whole question, if you do volumetric allocation, where local water supplies would have to be deducted off of that gallons per capita allocation, where is the incentive left for local agencies such as ours who just spent $66 million plus on a desalter? Where's the incentive to wean ourselves off state water project supplies? And can you have a situation where volumetric allocation would even make sense for our residents, given that it's so low and the amount of local supplies would be deducted off of that? So anyway, now I'm going to go down the weeds and I don't want to go there. So just know that it's going to be that's a tough discussion, and it is potentially ahead of us. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Mr. Tremblay. Thank you for all your work on that.
Could I have one question?
Sure thing, Kevin.
I mean, Mr. Tremblay or staff, will we continue to get updates as this progresses through the summer?
Yeah, you're saddled with an update for me every month, and more often as staff thinks is important.
Thank you.
It's a sure bet.
Yes.
And an important one. All right, that concludes all of our agenda items for our 5 o'clock session. We certainly have some for our 7 o'clock session. So if no one has anything else to add, we'll recess now to 7 o'clock. All right, we will stand in recess, and we'll be back at 7. All right, we're going to reconvene the meeting of the Camarillo City Council. And let the record reflect that we have all original 4 council members present with Mrs. Craven absent. We are going to take, I got public comment, I'll leave public comments after the discussion items, but, so we're going to take item Z, the fiscal year 2021-22 budget. We're going to take that in conjunction with CSD, I believe. So I'll have,
So I will reconvene Camarillo Sanitary District.
all right, with that, we have a staff report on item Z. Hey, Mark.
Yes, thank you. Have a brief report on the budget.
Bless you.
As we wait for that to come up, I will preface by saying each year we adopt the budget, a joint meeting of the city and the CSD. And I wanted to start off saying the city had successfully navigated the economic impacts of the pandemic over the last 2 years. But now with the ongoing recovery, we're facing yet more uncertainty with the inflation rising at record levels. That being said, this budget that we're presenting for next fiscal year, 22-23, is balanced and does provide for the continuation of the high levels of service that the community has come to expect. So to start off, there's a couple of different items that we're going to be talking about tonight in addition to the budget. First off, the 22-23 proposed budget. There will be several actions for you to consider. There will be 3 related to the budget, one for the city, one for the CSD, one for the trolley. Then there will be a GASB 54 commitment of fund balance action. These are all resolutions. The third one will be, third bullet will be the GAN appropriations limit. Those are both annual resolutions. And then the last item, the city and CSD compensation, will be 2 separate actions. So with the budget development process began in January. We had a preliminary budget review in March with both the CSD board and the city council. We had a budget workshop on May 7th. That was a much more detailed review, and that workshop lasted 4 hours on a Saturday. I'm sure you all recall. And so the budget is a balanced budget. That means that the operating revenues meet or exceed the operating expenditures. And then for the capital expenditures, that is a planned use of fund balance reserves. So to put it in context, the operating revenues and operating expenditures are what you would consider your checkbook. And then the other one-time capital expenditures are where you would pull from your savings. So you would save up the fund balance reserves for these planned capital projects. On that workshop, we talked about what is the budget? What is that question? How do you answer that question? How much is your budget? There's a couple of different ways to answer that. And in Camarillo, there are 3 different ways. One is the total budgeted expenditures for all funds. I believe we have in excess of 50 different funds throughout the city. The total of that is $144 million. Then we have what I refer to as the typical response is the general fund. Everyone seems to be focused on the general fund because that's where the majority of the city services are provided. The police services, community development, administrative services are recorded in the general fund. That is a $56 million budget. And that does include I think it's about $8 million of one-time expenditures between capital projects and between facility improvements that I'll touch on a little bit later. But there's a lot of one-time costs planned for next year that brings it back down to a lower level of about $47 million or so for the annual ongoing operational expenses typical for the general fund. And then the third category is when we focus on the CSD separately, and that CSD budget standalone is $26 million. So in this next couple of slides, I'll point out a few of the things that are included in the budget. Again, these items are mostly beyond the normal ongoing levels of service. I mentioned a little bit the facility improvement projects, and the city's facilities include the city hall, the corporate yard, the police station, the Camarillo Sanitary District, and the library. We also have several information technology software advancements, digital record systems, procurement management software or a contracts management software, a citizens services online permitting software, and a Camarillo Connect mobile app. And that's very similar to the C-Click Fix that you often hear about in other agencies. Those are all information technology software advancements to help get things more digitized, more efficient through use of software. Then the library contract with LS&S that was discussed earlier this evening, and the Ventura County Sheriff contract, maintaining the current service levels throughout. Next up, we focus on the CIP projects. This is more of the savings account type use of built-up reserves. They include the $4 million annual pavement rehabilitation program that a council member mentioned how great the streets look, and now we take pride in all of our streets. That's an annual program. And then several programs that are in the design phases. Final design for the Pleasant Valley Road Bike Lane project, final design for the sewer improvements per SSMP projects, and throughout this presentation, you'll hear a lot of acronyms. SSMP, I believe, is Sanitary System Master Plan, Management Plan. Environmental review, final design and bidding on the Dizdar Park renovation and expansion project. Final design and bidding for the City Hall Council Chambers remodel projects. And final design of the citywide advanced meter infrastructure project, and that one's commonly referred to as the AMI, where we have automated meters rather than the old manual meters that we have to patrol and read. So I'll stop right there and pause because that completes the brief presentation on the budget portion. So I'll pause there to see if there are any questions. Again, I want to reiterate for the folks at home that this was a 6-month process to do the budget development. We had 2 meetings with City Council, one the workshop on a Saturday that lasted 4 hours of discussion on all of the details of the budget. So this was more of the overview of some of the higher level items that we discussed.
Any questions? Kevin?
Yeah, Mark, could you talk a little bit about that final design of the citywide advanced meter infrastructure project?
I can talk a little bit. Maybe I'll defer to
Dave, sure.
Director
Thank you.
Klotzel.
Yes, sure. That's a project that's been in the CIP and ongoing. And actually, there was an item on the consent calendar tonight for consultant services to put together the final design package to go out to bid for essentially replacement of all of our water meters with smart meters is really what they are. So it's an advanced meter infrastructure that is direct remote read of meters to a data collection system that then comes into a central base. So it's an advancement and replacement of all our meters with a higher, more current technology.
Okay, thanks. And it's ongoing, it's going to be several months and perhaps a few years before we actually get it?
Likely about a year from now or into the fall of 23 is when we'll start seeing the start of the construction or the installation of the meters. We've got about a year to go through the final design and putting together that package for bidding. And then it'll be it'll take some time to implement across our 13-some thousand meters. So,
Are they, I don't want to say more accurate, but are they just keeping up with the new wave of technology that we have to keep up with to stay current?
correct,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, they are, the accuracy is there now and will continue to be. And then, like I said, it's the data capture. That's all direct feed to a collector, the different collector spots around the city. Then that'll feed that into the billing system for reading and billing of the water bills. And then it's it'll be more readily available information on water use per customer. That customers will be able to see some of that information. So it'll be very helpful to have that advanced technology and information at our fingertips.
Okay. Thanks, Dave.
All right. Mark, you're all good.
All right. Moving forward, another acronym, GASB Statement Number 54. Back in 2011, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, or GASB, required that categorization of classification of fund balance in the annual comprehensive financial report, or ACFR, previously CAFR, was required, is a requirement by GASB. So for us to maintain compliance with GASB standards, for us to submit for the award on our ACFR report, we want to adopt this resolution and set forth the commitments of fund balance as a categorization of the general fund balance. So City Council may commit fund balance for specific purposes by resolution, and at June 30, 2022, this coming fiscal year end, the general fund balance is projected to be $69.7 million. Of that amount, the recommended commitments total $48.8 million, and I'll go through that detail here. The first part of it is per council reserve goal, policy 3.05 states that the general fund reserve goal target should be about 50% of the expenditures. That equates to $23.7 million. The next several there are council discretionary items that were decided. $6.9 million for economic development, $10 million for natural disaster recovery, $200,000 for the Camp Springs debris barrier remediation maintenance, and $8 million for the Pleasant Valley Rec and Park District Senior Center, for a total of $25.1 million. Together with the 23.7 and the reserve goal is the 48.8 million. And I did want to share a follow-up of a question that came up during the workshop on Saturday, was that natural disaster recovery, and how confident are we with that number, and have we looked at it? And went back, and it is still a very accurate number as far as an estimate, and the basis for that is in talking with the California Joint Powers Insurance Authority, or CJPIA. About 5% of the valuation of all city properties comes out to about 9.5 million, so we rounded up to 10. But what that is the basically our deductible. If worst case scenario, every building went down, insurance, CJPI would take care of a portion of it, but we'd have to put up the 9.5 or 10 million for the deductible. So that is the way we calculated that figure. Pause there for any questions on the GASB 54.
Any additional questions?
Nope. Okay.
Sina, go ahead, Mark.
The next annual resolution we do is the annual GAN appropriations limit. Now, this one started in 1979, and actually I don't have, that GAN is not an acronym. I think that was the person's name who came up with it. But in 1979, Article 13B of the Constitution limited the amount of taxes that can be appropriated by government. Appropriated or spent, so this is basically a spending limit for governments. It's required to be set each fiscal year, and each fiscal year it builds based on annual inflation and population growth factors. For taking last year's limit and applying some growth factors, we come up with the next year's limit, which for 22-23 has been calculated to be 129.4 million. And you might be thinking, okay, a couple of slides ago I said our total budget was 144 million, so aren't we overspending? Well, the caveat to the GAN limit is that it is only subject to the taxes, proceeds of taxes that are limited to be spent. So the taxes that we collect total is that appropriation subject to the limit line, 36.9 million. So we are far below what our spending limit is, and most cities are. So the amount under the limit is 84.3 million. But this is a calculation required by Article 13B of the Constitution to set that every year. So I will pause. Any questions on the GAN limit?
I think you're good.
Okay. The last piece I have to talk about is the City and CSD Compensation Classification and Benefits Program. As one of the City Council goals was to maintain an effective workforce through competitive salaries, benefits, and training. The Consumer Price Index, a commonly used inflationary factor, is 8%. That's as of May, year-over-year comparison. So as I said, one of the challenges we're facing is these record inflation numbers, 8% year-over-year in May. So what is being included in this compensation classification resolution is a salary band adjustment of 7%, and then the salaries throughout the year would be including a July 1st 4% cost of living adjustment for all employees. and the benefits structure would remain unchanged. And the salary schedules that are attached to the resolution include the assistant city manager as well as all the department directors' salaries. So I will pause there. If there are any questions before we move to the recommended actions.
Seeing none, proceed.
Okay, as I mentioned, we have several recommended actions, starting off with 3 related to budget. So we can take those individually. As we have one, the third one, we'll have one council member that will need to recuse himself.
Do you want me to make that announcement now, or should we wait until, it's actually on discussion item number 3, and might as well do it now. It's the adoption of a resolution approving FY 22-23 trolley budget. I have to recuse myself because I do have, there is a trolley stop within the purvey of my business. So when we get down to that number 3, I have to recuse myself.
Yeah, so we'll hold that in reserve until you leave, and at this time, we'll also reserve any questions or discussion on that particular topic, if we have any, until, so I'll ask my colleagues to not discuss or ask any questions until you recuse yourself. Or if you need to recuse yourself, if we need to discuss any.
Just when I get down to
the
item
trolley.
3.
Yeah. All right, questions, discussion amongst colleagues. Mr. Tremblay, lead us off.
Just briefly, first of all, I want to say thank you, Mark, and thank you, finance staff, for the extensive effort on this. I think your presentations from year to year have gotten just even better and easily understood, and I really want to compliment you because I know this takes a tremendous amount of work. If anyone is listening to us online or over TV, I want you to know that the council members have worked on this extensively with the staff, and staff have worked with the council members extensively. We've asked dozens and dozens of questions. There have been modifications made pursuant to our input. We had that 4-hour marathon session, Saturday session. We really have looked at this extensively, so please don't mistake our lack of questions for our Director of Finance to be that we are not knowledgeable regarding these recommended actions. We are thoroughly knowledgeable. So, and again, I really appreciate the effort. And when the time is right, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to make a motion or a series of motions.
All right.
I could say ditto, but I'm going to say more. I too want to thank you and everybody in finance who, I agree, things, or maybe it's because I'm seeing it over and over again, so it's easier for me to understand things, but it always feels weird when the budget comes for us to vote on it at the council meeting that we don't spend hours on it. But the truth is, we really have spent that time. So thank you for all the work. And also thank you, we've been navigating through the pandemic and now inflation, some really challenging times. And we're in a really good position. And so that doesn't just happen. It's because of the work done here. And so thank you, and I'm really proud of where we are.
I'll make a quick comment. I too want to echo what, my contemporaries up here have said about the staff. And, the challenges that we always have every year, one of the biggest challenges is always the budget and the several hours that staff and council members, quite frankly, have spent. But, I just feel from a personal point of view so blessed to be in a city where we can do some good things. Like, for instance, the discussion we had about the library. It's so great that we've got some money in the budget that we can reopen our library and expand the hours for the citizens. And that's just, it's just wonderful. Again, award-winning, but I've been really proud in my years up here how we've always got awards for our budget here, and I know that doesn't come easily. There's a lot of hard work, and I just want to thank everybody that has a hand in this. So those are my comments.
And I'll simply add, I mean, yes, ditto. Anyone looking on the outside looking in or watching this meeting today thinks that, this is a rather short presentation. Everything seems rather simple, and it couldn't be the furthest from the truth. I know putting together this budget includes, I mean, it's work, your department bears a large brunt of it, I know, but I know there's input from every department, every director into this. You guys have to put it all together. The budget itself, that document is so easy to read and understand and digest, and I do agree, and I'll echo the comments, has gotten significantly easier. Staff has worked to be able to make it easier to understand, digest, and communicate to us. Your guys' presentation, yeah, it's only gotten better. So I really appreciate the effort, the countless, it's not hour, I mean, it's tens, hundreds of hours, and the amount of effort and time that's been put into this is extraordinary. And when it comes to tonight, there's, the questions have already been asked. There shouldn't be any real surprises from what's being presented to us because of all the review and questions and just thorough, the thorough looks from so many different people that have already happened. So, I had one question. I see 3 recommended actions up here, but my staff report has 7, although I know 2 of those are Camarillo Sanitary District.
I have 2 more slides.
Oh, okay, thank you, all right. Want to make sure it's not just 3. Yeah, it's the first 3, okay. Anyone else have anything else to add? No, I was just... Okay, Mr. Tremblay?
Actually, Mr. Mayor, yeah, I was going to make an inquiry of the chair and then of Mr. Pierik. Could we, would a motion be proper to, for the approval of, in our staff report, recommendations 1, 2, and 4 through 7, excluding out item 3, which is the trolley budget item? Could we do those in one motion?
The answer is yes, and you can do that both as the members of the council and as the member of the CSD board.
We can take that jointly?
Yes.
Okay.
Then I would make that motion jointly that the city council and the board of directors for CSD would adopt staff recommendation items 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and we'll deal with 3 separately, and that would be my motion for approval.
I'll second that.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Please vote. I guess on behalf of the Camarillo City Council and the Camarillo Sanitary District, that is a 4-0 and with 1 absent on that motion. And we'll give Mr. Kildee a second to excuse himself due to his before-mentioned conflict of interest.
Mr. Mayor, Madam President, so I would make a motion relative for both the city council and for Camarillo Sanitary, I guess it's Camarillo Sanitary District as well, isn't it? Anyway, a motion to adopt item 3. I'm not sure if it's for both city council and the Sand District.
Just City Council.
Just city council, I guess. A motion to adopt recommended staff item number 3.
And I will second.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Please vote. And that passes 3-4, 0 against, with 1 absence and 1 recusal. All right, that gets us through item Z. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, staff. And we should invite Mr. Kildee back. Sorry, and I'll pass it off to Ms. Santangelo to take over for the sanitary district public hearing.
So I will open the public hearing. Would anybody like to speak to the Camarillo Sanitary District? Seeing and hearing nobody, I will close the public hearing. And can I adjourn? No. Okay.
Mark's got a
I just have a
quick
brief
presentation, yeah.
Just a brief report on the agenda report. This item is to consider a resolution placing direct assessments on the Ventura County Secured Property Tax Roll for fiscal year 22-23. And the CSD Ordinance Number 49 provides the authority for delinquent sewer charges to be placed on the county secured property tax roll. We do this every year. Unfortunately, we have delinquencies that go throughout the year and fall on the dates we're looking at. This year, there were 16 accounts initially earmarked to be placed on the roll, and a notice was mailed on May 3rd. Since that time, 8 have cleared the delinquency, and 8 were remaining to be placed on the tax roll, and those are the 8 that are included in your resolution. So with that, it would be the public hearing and then the action to adopt the resolution, sending those to the county tax roll.
So I apologize for messing that all up. So now I will open the public hearing. Seeing that nobody would like to speak again, I will close the public hearing and open it up.
Madam Chair, may I make a motion to approve staff recommendation?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that passes 4-0 with Mrs. Craven absent. Now I can adjourn. So now I will adjourn. Thank you.
All right, and we will take up our last item, where's my agenda? AA, I believe, yep, AA, urgency ordinance to implement additional water conservation measures. Mr. Kotzel?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, City Council. Again, talking about water conservation, this won't be the last time that we'll be before you with this item as we proceed through summer and what lies ahead of us. But we do have action here tonight. Based on the continued drought conditions and compliance with State Metropolitan Water District and Cayugas Municipal Water District requirements, on May 25th, Council adopted Urgency Ordinance Number 1192. That was pursuant to Government Code Section 65858 and declaring water conservation measures with a goal of 20 to 30% reduction in water use and limiting outdoor watering to 1 day per week. Recently, on June 10th, additional water use restrictions were mandated by the State Water Resources and Control Board, immediately prohibiting any watering of non-functional turf with potable water at commercial, industrial, and institutional sites, which includes common areas of homeowners associations, condominiums, and retirement communities. The new state regulation defines non-functional turf as turf that is solely ornamental and not regularly used for human recreational purposes or for civic or community events. Non-functional turf does not include sports fields and turf that is regularly used for human recreational purposes or for civic or community events. The proposed new urgency ordinance attached to the agenda report is required to include the new prohibition of watering any non-functional turf with potable water at these commercial, industrial, and institutional sites. The new urgency ordinance is submitted pursuant to Government Code Section 36937 and will remain in effect until repealed by the City Council by a future ordinance as and when needed. This new ordinance includes the same conservation measures as in Ordinance Number 1192, which is repealed by the new urgency ordinance. The proposed ordinance includes the goal of 20 to 30% reduction in water use, limiting outdoor watering to 1 day per week as before, and also prohibiting the watering of non-functional turf with potable water at commercial, industrial, and institutional sites, along with other conservation measures. Drip-type irrigation systems and the use of recycled water continue to be both exempt from the restrictions, as well as hand watering of trees, shrubs, and ground cover by bucket or hose that continues to be allowed to maintain their health and to prevent soil erosion and fire hazards. The irrigation of functional turf, including community parks, community event and recreational areas, athletic fields, and golf courses, is allowed only as necessary to maintain the health of the functional turf, still with a goal of 30% reduction in water use. And also the use of potable water for ag irrigation as it must be reduced by the 20 to 30% goal also. Staff continues to implement a vigorous public information campaign to notify city water customers of these ever-evolving water conservation requirements, those increased levels, additional restrictions, and the focus is on gaining compliance from our customers. Some steps being taken in our public information outreach is, you may have seen around town, trailer-mounted electronic message signs we've deployed on arterial streets, as well as using the marquee sign here at Constitution Park. Mailers and bill inserts for city water customers. We have a water conservation webpage with FAQs, press releases and city news emails and posting on the city homepage. We've been coordinating this messaging with other water purveyors in the county and locally, especially our neighboring larger water district, Camarillo, and of course with Cayugas Municipal Water District. We continue to promote our efficiency rebate programs for water-saving devices. And then also, we've been able to, although in walking by this evening, see that the supply looks like it's dwindled or is out of, we do provide free low-flow shower heads, and we'll be continuing to keep those in stock that are available here at City Hall lobby. So that's all a summary of all the actions that we're continue to take, and we'll continue to focus on those items. In addition, the level of monitoring, notification, education, and enforcement of the water conservation requirements continues to increase, with a focus on providing customer service where possible to help city water customers achieve compliance with the restrictions. When necessary, penalties for violations of the urgency ordinance may be applied in accordance with this Camarillo Municipal Code. The city is doing its part to conserve water also. Along with faucets and toilets already being low water use in city facilities, all the landscape irrigation maintained by the city has been reduced to minimal levels, while making sure our valuable assets of our many trees, shrubs, and ground cover and functional turf areas survive. Where the health of trees will not be impacted, irrigation is being shut off at city areas of non-functional turf. This includes the areas on the east and south side of the library, some of the turf area at the old library on Ponderosa, and a couple small areas here on the south side of City Hall. These turf areas will continue to be maintained as needed, and then eventually, when conservation restrictions are eased and we're able to make some retrofits and plant new plants that which take additional water, which is why we're not going to be doing that right away. So as the restrictions are eased, projects will be implemented to transition these areas that I just described to low water use landscaping, similar to what has recently been done in the last few years here at City Hall and on the Carmen Median. If significant water conservation is not realized through the summer months, Councilmember Tremblay already provided and went over information on this, it is expected that the state and Metropolitan Water District will implement further restrictions on the use of water, including the possibility of zero outdoor water use. Future additional restrictions may and will likely require a new urgency ordinance to be considered by the City Council in the future. So that concludes my report, and I'm available for questions.
Questions? Mr. Kildee?
Yeah, Dave, as you kind of drive down Daily Drive and you see some of the office buildings and whatnot with the strips of lawn, are they under that ordinance where it's 1 day a week to water those?
So actually, those are the classic case of the new restriction of that ornamental turf that has no functional use, and those locations are to be not watered at all. Basically, no watering of that turf. One of the challenges is where there's trees involved in that watering, that's what still will be allowed to maintain the health of those trees. Part of our outreach and taking a look at those areas and contacting the owners about retrofitting some of the irrigation as much as possible to maintain water to those trees through a drip system or a retrofit of their heads, and then shutting off other sprinkler heads in locations where it's only watering grass. So there's going to be a lot of selective adjustments that are going to need to be made at those locations. So, that's a real challenge where there's trees that we definitely don't want to have be affected by no watering. But then there's also, as Councilmember Tremblay already mentioned tonight, the focus is on reducing the amount of turf, watering of ornamental turf, non-functional turf. So that's why I also mentioned some of these areas of city-owned facilities where there is turf. that has no use, we're going to be shutting the irrigation off to those. There are locations in there that have trees. Some of that will be watering by hand with city staff, and others retrofitting as needed to reduce the amount of water on that turf.
And do we still have that where homeowners can call the city and they, city staff or individual can go out to their home and do an analysis on where they may or may be able to make some savings?
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. All that information's on, would encourage people to visit our water conservation webpage. There's a link to it right on the homepage. The city's front homepage is one of the top 3 items there that takes to a water conservation page. And absolutely, that survey, a free survey is available to help. Again, the focus is helping customers achieve compliance with the restrictions and make revisions and corrections and repairs where needed to minimize the water waste.
Thank you.
Dave, I've had several residents of one particular neighborhood who have an HOA and a lot of common area contact me, and they're concerned about they understand what the definition of a functional turf is, but it's how does one determine whether the threshold is met? This is a lot of common area. There are some little peninsulas of grass, but aside from that, there's 3 or 4 large central lawn, areas, effectively parks within a community. And they've been told that there is no watering, that they will fall under the zero watering. But they contend that their families go and use these respective plots of grass for their kids to play, to get out. It's the only places they really have in the neighborhood. How does one determine whether these common spaces meet the threshold of functional turf?
Right, so that's where staff would need to look at the particulars there, and I'm not clear if they've been told by city staff or somebody actually taking a look at the use of those areas. In general, by definition, it sounds like that would fall under the restriction, but that's where we'll be taking a look at individual situations as people need help with that to determine what, if any, of that area could be determined functional. By all means, if it's being used by residents, it's definitely, there's more of a function to it than not. There's going to be some gray area and fine lines probably. And then what it really comes down to is, can the restriction be achieved? And again, if trees come into play, and it's going to take some time to implement some of these changes where it may be necessary of turning off some of those individual sprinkler heads and letting some of the other ones remain on to maintain as much functional turf space as possible. So we just recommend that they call the city water division phone number, and it's all available on the website, and get in touch with us, and we can help determine that.
I'll direct them to you and your, to staff. Yeah, they have the additional complication that they have a lot of trees spread amongst all those common areas. And I don't know to what extent they've segmented their watering system. So, okay. Any additional questions? Comments? Yeah, Mr. Tremblay, want to lead us off?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just 4 comments. First of all, I support this action. It's the right thing to do. But it should also be noted that the city is being required to take these steps. We're now in that situation. Secondly, we already had a very extensive discussion on water earlier tonight, and these conservation steps are the right thing to do. We are all in this together. It's a very difficult time. Thirdly, for folks who are listening, take a look at the website at SoCalWatersmart.com, I believe, not .org, SoCalWatersmart.com. And there is rebate information there on turf removal and other steps that you can take, and other incentives that people have for undertaking conservation steps. And finally, last Saturday, I was able to take a load of non-potable water from a station at Camarillo. And I'm using that in a turf area where we can only water once a week with potable water, but I'm able to use that non-potable water with a pump and, we have the whole thing set up, but without going through it. But that brings up a question that is, I have been asked by folks whether or not the city would be willing to make available any recycled water from the wastewater plant or the water treatment plant or otherwise non-potable water available for individual residents. And I think that maybe especially those questions we may be getting even more questions. I'm already getting some now, but we may even be getting more as this year goes on and as we get into August and September in particular and October. Can you comment on that, Dave?
Sure. Probably the first and foremost is our available supply of recycled water is essentially already allocated to existing users, both recreational irrigation, as you well know, the large sports field at Village of the Park is irrigated with our reclaimed water, and also the landscaping within Village of the Park, and then our agricultural users of recycled water. There's really not a whole lot left to go around. The timing of when there is excess is not programmed in a way that it can be scheduled to where there's known when there's going to be recycled water available. And what happens in that case is under an agreement with Camarillo is we deliver any excess to the Camarillo system. So in essence, some of the recycled water that Camarillo may be delivering could actually be coming from our wastewater treatment plant, our reclaimed plant, although the majority, if not all, what I understand of how Camarillo is able to do this is they have a different source that's not from their wastewater treatment
Correct.
plant. It's from the Conejo Creek.
Correct.
Through the diversion. So that also is more readily able to be delivered to customers because it doesn't have any permitting restrictions as we have with our recycled water. There's more regulatory requirements to go through to be able to utilize our recycled water out of our plant and give that to the public for use. It could be done. We're just, number one, for the lack of volume that we have available, really doesn't pencil out to go through the regulatory and then also the infrastructure. We're not set up to provide deliveries of our reclaimed water out of our plant.
Can I keep going on this? I mean, understand we're not set up to do deliveries. Camarillo is in a situation where a Camarillo resident like myself goes to a station and takes delivery of that, and it's non-potable water. It's not recycled water per se. It hasn't gone through their water treatment plant. It's Conejo Creek water that has not yet been treated. That said, I wonder if the city, notwithstanding your comments about the obligation to deliver recycled water, my question is, does the city have contractual flexibility in those agreements that you mentioned with the ag growers and with Pleasant Valley Recreation and Park District to utilize or to say to those folks, look, we're going to utilize a portion of those, given the circumstances, and this is a water emergency. Does the city have the ability to keep some of that water available for its own residents? And if that were to occur, it would mean people actually going out to the treatment plant. And I don't want to get into all that, but what I want to know is, does the city have the contractual flexibility to say to those recycled water users, we're going to keep a portion of that for ourselves?
Right. We'd have to research that. Off the top of my head, I don't know.
What I would ask, if I have support from another council, what I would ask is that there be a report back to us on that question and on the question of whether or not, just looking down the road in terms of planning, do we have any ability, does the city have any ability to supply folks with recycled water? And I understand the regulatory obstacles too, but we're also in a water emergency, and the regional board is mindful of that. Camarillo does it so that you go out and you pick up 50 gallons minimum, 300 gallons maximum, and that's very deliberate because water is about 8 pounds per gallon, so they don't want over 2,400 gallons of water going down the road in a vehicle. But there are folks who may be very interested in doing that and in retaining the investment in their landscaping or in their yards. So I would really like us to take a further look at this with a report back if there's support for that from the council. Just a report back on that.
I'll second that.
And who knows, it may not be feasible, but we'll see. Anyway, so I'm supportive, that was a long-winded way of saying I'm supportive of this, but I have those comments.
It's worth looking at.
Hmm?
Doesn't hurt to look.
Nope, doesn't hurt to look.
Any additional questions, comments? All right, I'm going to request a reading of the title, or of the ordinance.
Yes, this is urgency ordinance number 1195, an urgency ordinance of the City Council of the City of Camarillo, California, declaring water conservation measures with the goal of 20 to 30% reduction in water use.
I'll move to waive further reading and adopt urgency ordinance to implement water conservation measure with the goal of 20 to 30% reduction in water use.
I have a motion and a second. Please vote. That passes 4 with 1 absent. We're down to public comments. I don't have any public comments or comment cards. I don't see anyone who isn't staff in the audience. So I'm going to presume there's no one here to provide public comment unless staff wants to. So we will close our public comments. We have no additional public hearings. At this point, we're going to adjourn. Does anyone else have anything to add? No? All right. We will adjourn. Camarillo City Council. Thank you very much. Have a good night.